Good afternoon. My name is Joel Tickner, and I'm the co-director of the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council. I'd like to welcome you today to today's webinar of the GC3, or Green Chemistry and Commerce Council's Green Chemistry Education webinar series entitled Building Market Share for Green Products. Many companies have begun using green chemistry principles in designing their products and manufacturing processes, but the conversation about how best to leverage green chemistry practices to build market share is ongoing. Is it better to advertise oneself as a green company or to focus exclusively on product performance? In this webinar, 3 companies will share their approaches to marketing their sustainable practices. Topics will include opinions on green labels and product packaging, attending conferences to highlight sustainable innovations, and philosophies on expanding sustainability beyond green chemistry. The goal of this webinar, in essence, is how do we talk about green chemistry innovation, both internally in the firm and external to the firm. We have 3 excellent speakers representing firms in different parts of supply chains. Steve Davies is the Director of Public Affairs and Communications of NatureWorks. He leads our marketing and public affairs globally, and NatureWorks is a company formed with the mission of bringing to market a broad family of naturally advanced renewable sourced materials. Saskia van Gendt has the envious title of Captain Planet at Method, the green soap company based in San Francisco. Saskia works on greenskeeping for North America, focusing on improving the company's packaging, green building, ingredients, and supply chain. Charlie Forslund is a principal in the Materials Innovation Exploration Group at Steelcase. He's a lifelong innovator who loves the challenge of engineering and design. Steve, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, Joel. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk from a materials perspective, and in a webinar that's set, obviously, explicitly around building market share for green products, I'm probably going to look immediately contrarian, as the title on my first slide shows, because I'm going to focus on building market share, not for green, per se, materials, but new-to-the-world materials. And there's a reason for this choice of words. My explicit thesis today is that when you've got a truly green product, then the less one markets that angle, then the sort of perversely, the more one is successful in building a market for that product. And it sounds perverse, and it's important, so I'm going to repeat it. This is all assuming, of course, that one has a truly green product with some real credentials behind it. My point is, the less you market that angle, the more you're going to be successful. So if it's not about green, what is it about? And here, of course, it depends on what your product is and what you have in your hands at the end of the day. You have to obviously have something real. So my point, if it's not about green, what is it about? Well, you got to have something real in your hands. And for NatureWorks, what it's about is all about functionality, leading cost competitiveness, and something I'm going to call preference, which I'll explain further as I go here. So to support my theses, and I hope leave you all at the end of this webinar nodding your head in agreement with me, I'm going to talk from a couple of different perspectives. I'm going to cover who we are and what we do, where our materials are in the market as some proof points of my theses, and wrap up by talking about some things we've done to drive market development. So first of all, who we are and what we do. Simply put, NatureWorks is in the business of turning greenhouse gases into performance products. Those products involve not only a broad portfolio of polymers designed for the plastics and fibers markets, but also an array of performance chemicals, all coming from the same fermentation platform and designed for use in adhesives, sealings, surfactants, and so on. Now, it's fair to say that for some, this idea of turning greenhouse gas into product is a bit abstract. So I want to be really clear about what we're doing and how we're doing it today, and how we plan to do it in the future. Today, we capture and sequester greenhouse gas, CO2, using what I really call the good old-fashioned method of photosynthesis. Plants, in a figurative way, harvest CO2 out of the atmosphere, transform it into the body of the plant. We, in a literal sense, harvest those plants, extract the plant sugars, ferment them. We make a building block, green building block called lactic acid that occurs naturally in the body. We have, so to speak, industrialized it, and we turn that into a broad range of polymers and performance chemicals. How we do it, of course, matters, and I will come back at the end of my talk here and talk about how it's critical in growing a market for new-to-the-world products that you answer questions about what you're doing transparently and authentically. Now, while we have invested while we are obviously vested today in first-generation sugar, as it's called, specifically sugar from industrially purpose-grown cornstarch in the U.S., we are investing in actively broadening that portfolio of feedstocks. What we want to have, so to speak, is a range of arrows in our quiver, and we're now engineering a second plant that we intend to go into Southeast Asia, where still a first-generation sugar will be used. It will be cane sugar. But we're very interested in cellulosic feedstocks. We take a hard look at that, and we keep up with the evolving technology. But we're actually much further along in what is shown on the right-hand column on this chart, which is what we simply call next-generation feedstocks. We're in a very real sense, we've leapfrogged right over cellulosic sugars. We've looked at the notion that if your true feedstock is greenhouse gas, why go an agricultural route at all? How would one directly convert that feedstock directly into the building block that one needs? And putting action behind what can be sort of an abstract idea here, we actually set up a joint development agreement a year ago with a California startup, a company called Callista, and together are designing what are called methanotropes, organisms that will literally, in layman's terms, digest methane and excrete lactic acid, the building block that we want. It's a multi-year program. It hit a significant proof point in the summer when our partner demonstrated on a lab scale they could make the green building block we want. And we're proud of another milestone we just achieved in October, which is significant for us, for a little company like NatureWorks, significant funding, $2.5 million funding from the Department of Energy to look at renewable sources of methane, biogas as it's known, from anaerobic degradation, wastewater treatment, and maybe landfill. So this discussion is all about building market share, in my case, for new-to-the-world materials. And so I want to just quickly level set and illustrate in which markets our material has a presence. And this is important, I think, because we find that folks in the market tend to see us strictly from the point of view of the market they're in, and they're often blind to what else is happening in parallel markets. So for us, hearkening back to my theses, what all those diverse markets have in common, and on the prior side you saw markets ranging from disposable single-use packaging to the products themselves, fibers and nonwovens, and even durable products made from this building block, lactic acid. What all those have in common, those markets, is the same value proposition has been successful in building market share for what some think of as a green product. The value proposition, again, is built on three pillars. You heard me at the beginning talk about it as functionality, price competitiveness, and preference, and I've elaborated a little bit here on what I mean by that. By functionality, I mean that one has to have a compelling and interesting set of properties. The material has to work. It's not only enough that it work, but it has to work at the right price, obviously. And it's no accident that I've ordered these the way I have, left to right, because with functionality at the right price, then what comes into play is what I've called preference. Some have told me, well, that's a bucket for really green attributes. Okay. It encompasses things for us like lower carbon footprint, fossil energy usage, bio-based or renewable feedstock, and what for some are some pretty vital health concerns around the material, the additives or the components in the materials they use. So with that perspective of, for us, what is the three-legged stool of the value proposition around what we're marketing, I want to now just scan across a broad set of markets and very quickly give you sort of a 30,000-foot tour of how that value proposition's played out, and some of that, and explicitly call out in some cases how this has worked. So a proof point I think that many of us can appreciate, because we participate literally daily in this market, is yogurt. The dairy market, which is until now polystyrene, has had a stranglehold on packaging in this so-called form-fill-seal market, where, little known to many of us as consumers, polystyrene is the material of choice because of its functional properties. What Stonyfield and a character well known to the GC3 community, Gary Hirschberg, sort of did 3-4 years ago was demonstrate that the material we sell can work very well here. And he's used a different set of words. This is Gary's slide I've plopped in here, but you can see the three pillars I talked about, where there's clearly a performance angle. He's got less breakage, a better food protection with a stronger package, a strong environmental angle, cost competitive, no increase in price, and satisfied consumer preference, and certainly a Stonyfield preference to get away from styrene. Switching to a wholly different market, and on the next slide, really more of an engineering market, you see a company, Ultaglass, probably a little-known company, but the product well-known to most people, plexiglass, which is an acrylic, very poor impact strength typically, unable to compete with a material I've labeled here PC, polycarbonate, which is very good impact resistance. And what they saw is a super functional benefit when they blended in specific Ingeo grades of ours, sort of unforeseen benefit that you get. You're able to make plexiglass behave from an impact point of view a lot like polycarbonate. That's a super benefit, a super performance benefit. On the next slide, it's a completely different market. Now, one of our customers using Ingeo in a non-woven fabric format to sell reusable bags to retailers. And this is their sales sheet I've shown here. And again, I'm not going to read it to you, but just call out the hierarchy. Their functional benefits, the performance characteristics as they sell this to distributors that would sell to people that want to print their logo on it. Functional benefits listed first, then the environmental, if you will, credentials behind it. A well-known brand, obviously 3M, just introduced a medical drape fabric, similarly a non-woven. Strong environmental play in how they pitch this, but hand in hand in the same sentence in the underline is mine, you see sustainability with product performance mentioned. A European company until recently marketing strictly paper products, and now what they've done is, again, seen that they could blend this particular grade of bio-based plastic with the paper to make a durable product that lets them mold really things that you'd never think of molding out of a paper product. And if the next slide will advance, you'll see a chair made, a reusable chair, that is pretty durable and reusable. Again, the performance pitch here is implicit, in the visual. So let me wrap up this visual scan through of markets with probably what is the best known recent example, 3D printing, where the substrate of choice in 3D printing, and well-known companies like MakerBot offering desktop printers, the material of choice is Ingeo being used to replace a styrene-based plastic, ABS, and to see the performance characteristics that the makers of the monofilament use to print parts. You don't see an environmental play here or a green product play. It's all about this having the right functional benefits, that it doesn't shrink, this particular plastic being used, and lets them print a very high resolution part. There is a preference point at the end, as I called it, low emissions. Nobody wants to smell styrene in their home office. But it's, again, the hierarchy of points that I want to call out here. So I'll move on and sort of wrap this up. A huge array of parts being made from 3D printing. And this slide, and maybe all the previous examples, have gotten some to ask me, sort of pause and ask me the question, well, so Steve, NatureWorks, are you telling me there's no place for green credentials here? And my answer is simply put, that of course there is. You've seen them, I think, embedded in the prior charts. There is a place for green credentials, and it's really all about being specific. And I list here for you, not so much to go through this and explain this chart to you, but simply an example of specificity. Well, here we've shown carbon footprint, but be very specific what we mean by carbon footprint. This is simply a comparison where at the factory gate of what a kilo of plastic of these different plastics, comparing the kilos of CO2 put into the atmosphere until that point. So this sort of specificity is very useful. And in the next slide, what you see is how the world's biggest retailer just rolled that right into its corporate CSR statements. Walmart here, having back in 2010 announced a corporate goal of something like 20,000 tons of carbon reduction in its supply chain, obviously picked up that and fed right off of it. So specificity is what matters. So just back to my thesis that it's not about green, it's about functionality, cost, and preference, which is where you would see what some would call green attributes pop up. But it's also about, with all that established, you've got to have something that functionally works at the right price. But then I think what we found is it's not enough just to have the product. You've got to support and fuel innovation in the market. And we smile at NatureWorks because as much as sharing and the collaborative economy are sort of the buzzwords of choice lately, and often seen as the purview of folks like Uber or Airbnb, I want to give you an old-fashioned interpretation of the collaborative economy. It's a conference we put together in the material space, a conference we called Innovation Takes Root. It's become known as ITR in the plastics and fibers trade. And it is very simply a bit of an old-fashioned notion of getting folks together, a users group, in what we called, back in 2008, a collaborative forum for the global user community, the folks using our resins or wanting to use them. And look, we sell polymers and performance chemicals at the end of the day. We're not in the business of organizing conferences. So why do we do this? Simply put, we found it a super forum for cross-sharing innovation, getting passionate customers in front of each other. And this is not NatureWorks talking to its customer base. We set up the forum and stand back and just enjoy watching the cross-fertilization that occurs over now 4 conferences. We've got 300 to 400 people showing up, 200 companies, and global representation. So it's been a super mechanism for jump-starting and feeding innovation between all those different diverse markets I showed you, and really driving market adoption for a new-to-the-world material that until people, especially newcomers, come to this conference, they often don't know what to make of it or how to process it. So just wrapping up here, this slide, I don't know if you can read it, but I want to just call out the measure of our success and what we did with that forum in innovation sharing. I think I smile when I read this. This is a leading editor of Plastics Technology in the top left. If you read his last sentence, it sort of makes us smile at NatureWorks. He describes upstart family materials challenging the established order. It sort of sounds like a West Coast startup, not a company shipping, for heaven's sake, resins by the rail car load, right? And further validation of the focus we've had on functional benefit versus green in order to drive, perversely, market adoption of a green chemical is sort of bottom right from a publication in Asia that said all about the focus on PLA, which is what our NGO grades are today made of, technical functionality. So again, told us we'd gotten it right. So we'll wrap up with one last point of what's important. I mentioned this earlier. It's all about authenticity and transparency. When one makes a material from today agricultural materials, brings it to new markets, one is rightfully challenged with all sorts of questions about land use, land stewardship, where your materials go at the end of their life. They're the right questions that should be asked with any new material. And what we found is absolutely critical is to be transparent about where we are today, what's in all, that we're not perfect, but we're working pretty darn hard, and where we're going and where we're investing in the future. So I could say a lot more about this. I won't in the interest of time, but I think this is absolutely critical in building market for new materials. So I'll wrap up. I hope it's clear why my thesis as I started off was a little bit perhaps provocative, but my point again is that we best succeed in marketing more sustainable products by really not marketing sustainability at all, and I'll leave it there.
Hello, I'm Saskia, and as mentioned, I work on greenskeeping at Method, and just wanted to introduce Method a little bit. First of all, the Method has been around since about the 2000, and we're a green cleaning company based in San Francisco. We make, if you're not familiar with our products, we make laundry detergent, hand soap, all-purpose cleaner, household cleaners, and greenskeeping is really about what we do as a company, so the products that we make, how we make them, and then also at a brand level who we are and kind of our social sustainability programs. And I thought a way to kind of explain the marketing perspective about greenskeeping is just walk you through some of the programs that we do under each of these 3 categories and highlight when we communicate to the consumer and when the message is a little bit more recessive. So walk you through a couple of examples about programs that we do and we highlight publicly, and some of the other programs that tend to be just things that are integrated into our everyday operations. So hopefully you'll get some good examples out of it. So this is the comprehensive overview of everything that we do under greenskeeping. And as you can see, it's a lot of different programs. So if you try to communicate this out to the public, it can be a little bit confusing. I kind of agree with the previous speaker that a lot of marketing around green can be a little bit overwhelming, and there is so much green communication out that you have to be selective about what you're talking about. So this is highlighting in another visual way everything, all the environmental considerations and sustainability considerations that go into greenskeeping, so that you can see that they're bucketed under health-related effects, environmental-related effects, and community-related effects. And this is just another way to essentially communicate the comprehensiveness of the programs that we have in place under greenskeeping. And conversely, you can see how some other companies communicate on and consider sustainability. So just looking at the natural origin. So even these two diagrams use design to hopefully effectively communicate the comprehensiveness of the environmental programs that we have at Method. So jumping in a little bit to the product level, so everything that goes into environmental and health considerations to the product. So we have a very in-depth ingredient selection process. Packaging is a huge concern in terms of post-consumer recycled material and recyclability of our packaging at end of life. And then looking at all of the components that go into the formula itself. So you can see that there's a lot of different programs, and the way that we summarize that externally is through the cradle-to-cradle certification. And if you're not familiar, I'm sure most folks on this call are well familiar with the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, but it really looks at the full life cycle of creating products and making sure that all of the technical materials are cycling infinitely and all the biological materials are cycling infinitely. And that really feeds well into our product development process and is something that we use as a philosophical model for everything that we do. It applies and is a great model for any kind of product development process because it really allows you to look at sourcing, use phase, and end of life or recycling. So all of our products are certified under cradle to cradle. We have about 75% of our products that are certified at the gold level, and the rest are certified at silver. And the reason that we use cradle to cradle is because we consider it a very comprehensive certification. It covers a number of different attributes, environmental and health attributes, and can be very comprehensive in terms of the products that it applies to. One of the few companies that have the cradle-to-cradle certification for cleaning products and personal care products, but as you can see, it could apply and does apply to a number of products that are in the built environment and in other areas of consumer product goods. And this is one example that we do put a lot of thought into the entire product design process, and then ultimately we do choose to communicate this outward through the cradle-to-cradle certification. So you'll find the logo is on all of our bottles, and we choose to communicate that to the consumer because we see that it's very, very comprehensive in terms of the certification. And then what really goes into that certification? So all of our ingredients are assessed by a third party, McDonough Braungart Design Chemistry, before they're used in any formulation. So you can really see that this is integrated into our process, and that rolls up ultimately into the certification itself. We also believe in transparency. That was mentioned in the previous speaker as well, but just choosing to communicate out to the consumer all of the ingredients that go into the product, as well as a number of attributes about our supply chain publicly. So making sure that transparency is a key part of how we communicate outward. So one area that's a little bit more recessive is talking and communicating around recyclability and recycled content. So we do source the majority of our bottles that are coming from 100% post-consumer recycled PET, and they're also designed to be recyclable. And our general philosophy around that is that we want to put as much post-consumer recycled material in our bottles and ultimately design them to be compatible with curbside recycling streams. And the reason that we do this is because we're kind of trying to take something out of the equation for consumers and just make it as easy as possible. So there's a lot of confusion around recycling, so trying to select the types of packaging that is most compatible with conventional recycling systems. So looking at our entire portfolio, the majority of our packaging is PET and HDPE because those are the the plastics that are most widely recycled. Polypropylene, we're seeing an increased amount of polypropylene recycling just because it's kind of modeled after the beverage industry. If you think about Coca-Cola or Pepsi in a beverage container, that's a PET bottle with a polypropylene cap. So we're starting to see a lot more recycling for that same configuration, which is the majority of our packaging as well. But this is an example where these are the considerations that we put into the design process, but then ultimately trying to make that message actually pretty recessive so that the consumer can just assume that the packaging is compatible with recycling streams. And these are a number of other considerations that go into our entire product development process, but a lot of these are about our screening processes for ingredients, how we make sure that none of our suppliers will ever give us what we call dirty ingredients. So we have an entire dirty ingredient list that goes to all of our suppliers, like parabens are on there and a number of materials that we would never want in any formula. I mentioned cradle-to-cradle standard. So these are all integrated into our process, but then we're pretty selective in how we communicate them outward in terms of to the consumer and to marketing. So shifting a little bit to examples around how we make our products. So this really looks at our supply chain, how we source materials, how we do manufacturing. And this is where I think we really use design to communicate a lot of pretty complicated projects that we do. So just give you a couple of examples. So again, we have Cradle to Cradle as a philosophical guide for everything that we do, both on the product development side and how we create products themselves and transport them, manufacture them. We work really closely with our suppliers. So right now we have a combination of contract manufacturers. I'll explain a little bit at the end, the kind of future for our manufacturing. But right now, through a code of conduct that all of our suppliers sign when we sign a contract with them, they're required to report back to us how much water, energy, and materials are consumed in creating our products. This is a way for us to really keep track of our total footprint and then also identify where we can make improvements with our supply chain. But this is something kind of complicated and kind of embedded within our entire process, so it's hard to figure out, how do you communicate that outward to consumers, and I'll explain in a minute how we do that. This is another part of our supply chain. We have a biodiesel fleet. This is a picture or a diagram of one of our biodiesel trucks. It goes into all the different components that try to make our trucking processes as efficient as possible. Right now we have biodiesel in about 20% of our fleet. We're looking to expand that, but just looking at the carbon reduction that comes from biodiesel. And I mentioned that all of our suppliers are required to provide us the energy that is associated with producing our products. We roll that into our total carbon footprint, and then we quantify the value of how much carbon we would need to buy from a conventional carbon market, and instead, through that valuation, offer that as an incentive back to our suppliers to make any kind of energy efficiency or supply efficiency into their process itself. So our suppliers have invested in things like lighting efficiency projects, LED projects. Some have done solar-powered forklifts. So you can see that instead of just basically buying a Band-Aid through a carbon offset program, we're offering those incentives, financial incentives, to hopefully reduce our carbon footprint directly to our supply chain. We also buy wind power on behalf of all of our facilities. So how do we really communicate a number of these different programs in a consolidated way? And one thing that I really feel privileged about is having really talented designers on staff that help us translate and re-communicate a lot of the things that we do in greenskeeping in a way that is very beautiful and also kind of distills in a very designed way, communicate some stories around what we do. So this is an example of our carbon footprint. We call it Project Tiny Feet. And you can see at the top, there's our total carbon footprint, and it's broken out into where the carbon footprint lies. And like most consumer product companies, the majority of our carbon footprint comes from the product itself. So about 56% of our carbon footprint comes from that. And then distribution is a huge chunk of that. But it's also a great way just to communicate internally. A lot of people think that all of the flight transport is a huge part of our footprint, but really it's about 1% to 2% of our total footprint. So it's a good tool also just for internal education. In the middle, you can see how we've already achieved reductions by our investments in post-consumer recycled packaging and through our biodiesel fleet. So kind of taking in credit and getting good awareness about what we've already done to reduce our footprint. And then the last part, the bottom part, is really challenging ourselves to go further and what are the next steps that we can make to further reduce our footprint. So just wanted to share this as an example of consolidating a lot of our different environmental programs into one slide and kind of using the design to do storytelling and communicate a number of different projects that we have. And then shifting a little bit into the third category, really looking at a brand level about how we conduct social sustainability programs and also how we communicate those out. So I mentioned our carbon reduction program where we provide incentives to our suppliers. And the intent of this slide is really just to communicate our consciousness, but also our optimism. I think that's one of the facets of the brand that I really appreciate the most, is that, you know, we can all get doom and gloom about environmental tragedy, but really to be optimistic as a brand about how we can take responsibility for our footprint and make strides to lead by example by making real and significant improvements and lead by example. The next one is on animal testing. So this is another example of how we've integrated this into our process. We don't choose to put the eco label on our package the same way that we do cradle to cradle, but you'll see that as examples of our animal testing on our website, for example. And then another facet of our social sustainability program is everyone at Method gets 3 days per year to volunteer in the community. We do a bunch of large all-office community projects, and that's just another component. And the last one is really talking about the concept of business for good. So this comes under the framework of benefit corporation, or B Corp. And this is a great way just to demonstrate that we want to pioneer a new framework for how businesses can operate. So Method is luckily a company that was founded with the intention to do social and environmental good from its very beginning. So it's pretty integrated into everything that we do. But it also provides, the B Corp framework provides a model for how companies can both make a profit but also commit to doing social and environmental good to our shareholders. So we were a founding B Corp. We helped develop this framework for how companies can communicate this and really develop programs on environmental and social sustainability and have it validated by the third party, B Lab. And then the second piece is solidifying our commitment and long-term mission by reincorporating in the state of Delaware as a benefit corporation. So the name of the company changed from Method Products, Inc. to Method Products, PBC. And that solidifies our long-term commitment to doing social and environmental good. And just wanted to kind of wrap this up. So I mentioned a couple of different ways that we communicate and share out components that we're doing on greenskeeping. So where we choose to use logos and where they may be a little bit more receptive, how we use design to communicate a number of very, very complicated programs into a way that allows for storytelling and really allows for distilled understanding of complex issues. And the last one, just pioneering new projects, doing things a little bit differently as a business. So definitely agree that sustainability can be confusing. A lot of people that pick up Method actually do not know that they're buying a green product. So a lot of the way that we communicate is a little bit recessive, but there's so many different programs that go into that. But we use design and logos and some of these key projects to allow for the reinterpretation of what we do in greenskeeping. The last slide is just showing the factory that is opening this month, where you have a LEED Platinum factory on the south side of Chicago. And this is really the next frontier for us as a company, really developing social programs around the factory and community development around the factory, and continue to be pioneers in our industry. So with that, I will pass it over to Charlie.
Great, thank you, Saskia. Charlie, we're giving you control of the keyboard now.
So thank you. This has been very interesting so far. And thank you for inviting Steelcase here to present the marketing aspect of green chemistry. For some of you that signed up early to hear Dave Wieneman, member of our advanced marketing team, Dave was actually pulled away to help out on a new product launch. So I'm here speaking on his behalf. Not sure everybody's familiarity with Steelcase. This is outside of our innovation center. For myself, I work with Dave and other people managing material innovation initiatives across Steelcase. So my specialty is not green chemistry per se, but material innovation as a whole. Steelcase is the world's largest office manufacturer, globally headquartered out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Our goal at Steelcase, simply put, is to create great work experiences wherever work happens. And I'm here to focus this discussion a little bit on some of the design considerations and the marketing of green chemistry, specifically on the front end of product development. And I'll get into that a little bit as we, towards the end of the presentation. I want to give a little bit of a history on where we started that gives you a better feel for our market approach. Again, there's quite a community here within Steelcase, and many of you may be already familiar with the people on board. But Steelcase's statement on community or on sustainability, it's one of today's fundamental business challenges and our inspiration. Every day our team works to create maximum value from our available assets and be catalysts for good. We know our journey along the way. It's our responsibility to care for our planet and its people. Obviously, listening to everybody else, that is everybody else's pledge as well. This is a quote from our former CEO, Jim Hackett, which nicely summarizes our over 100-year history with materials innovation. This image on the left is actually Steelcase's first product. It's a metal waste basket designed to look like wood. It's actually made of thin, cold-rolled steel in an era in the workplace when smoking was commonplace. So this is a statement that was made at our 100-year anniversary and kind of said, you know, Steelcase began on the tenets of material innovation, and it continues to drive us today. I won't read it directly, you can read it, but it kind of illustrates that continuum around material innovation. So, like many, our market is driven by different certifications and boards and influences that are associated with green chemistry. Our end customer and the design firms that they engage have a pretty strong appetite around these certifications, and we see that a significant amount of the buying decisions ultimately come from the goals that are set by you know, the architectural and design community. So that actually helps us create a strong business atmosphere that's you know, surrounded around green chemistry. Here's a more expansive look at many of the regulations, the desired certifications, and customer requirements that drive toward a higher level of green, sustainable thinking that we put into our products and services. Without going into detail, the key takeaway from this list is that the demand exists, and it's actually created that opportunity for us to differentiate through sustainability. Even moreover, the local and regional jurisdictions really help influence up to the national and even global levels of some of the product platforms that we develop here at Steelcase. So I'm going to just take a moment, breeze through that introductory slide, to talk about some of the product samples we have. Let's make sure that that goes through. There we go. So to ground the conversation, and I heard this from both speakers before, is that in some cases there are things that are just fundamentally the right thing to do and others that are actually marketed. So, you know, as with all the companies, some things we just do because we want to celebrate the fact that it's green, and other times, given the volume and all the criteria behind it, it just it aligns well with the overall strategy. And so I'm going to go through a number, let's say 3 different product samples. The first one is an office system which is called Answer, and Answer is the top-selling systems product in the world. And also, you wouldn't know about it through its marketing, but it's PVC-free. So when you think about the edge trim and all the different details to it that maybe traditionally would have handled PVC, we sought out to make that PVC-free. Through scale, Answer allowed us to do the right thing and eliminate PVC. And while some of the customers had requested this, we didn't really have to widely broadcast this accomplishment. And we simply believed it was the right thing to do. Second example that we kind of thought about was an experience over the years of shifting from a solvent-based paint to powder coat painting, which is pretty much universal here at Steelcase now. And it's both on metal and plastic surfaces. It's made that transition, and it was a long transition to make, probably 15 years. And we switched it to powder coat for both environmental and operator benefits. We didn't launch a marketing campaign around this. It was, again, simply the right thing. Here's another product. It's our Think Chair. It's one of the most sustainable products we have ever marketed. The Think Chair has maintained its position as one of the world's top seating lines in environmental stories since it was launched over a decade ago. In developing the Think Chair, we considered where it came from, where it comes from, how it's made, and what it'll ultimately be when it's no longer a chair. The new Think is one that actually, if you track our development, we relaunched it. New aesthetic, but maintaining that very strong environmental story. So one, as going through this with the design group, one in this slide deck, one of the great comments that he made, one of the greatest aspects of a sustainable product, if you love the chair, you're simply likely to keep it longer. And amen to that. It's great. So just a quick few facts about Think. First ever cradle-to-cradle certification, first ever BIFMA level certification, indoor air quality, disassembles so that end-of-life consideration is very well considered. The material chemistry is spot on, and so just a really proud product for Steelcase. So I want to go back just for a moment to that wastebasket, our first product, which was called Victor. For our 100-year anniversary, we went back to our roots and launched Victor 2, which is the image on the right. And this, you know, this had all the key attributes to a good sustainable product. But what it really went after is that Steelcase really experimented on ourselves. We removed the trash bins from every room, the different independent workstations, and switched to more of a centralized hub, a recycling hub. And we started at the same time using more compostable products in our cafe spaces, and immediately saw the reduction of the amount of trash that had been produced. And so while Victor 2 is just a trash can, it's really altered the behavior within our work environment. So it's a really great win for everybody. So I'm going to shift gears now to something I'm more familiar, that is navigating through the early trials of new product development. And some background, you know, this activity that I'm a part of evolved within Steelcase as an experiment to help bridge new ideas across different product brands and disciplines. And the illustration on the left is showing a number of things. Innovation, simply put, is nonlinear, and it can be somewhat chaotic. It's structured more as a co-op, so different peoples from different disciplines come together. And we're here to share a common objective. Today, fast forward to this point in time, it's more integrated into our overall development process. So if you look at the lower right-hand graphic, that shows more or less our Steelcase's development process, in which the diamond shapes represent kind of the inherent decision-making processes we go through along the way, the divergent exploration to decision-making cycles that have to become more and more refined along the way. And part of this story is just explaining some of my experience around that and some of the things that have worked and that we've learned. We at Steelcase leverage market themes to help create direction and focus. Our product is very broad, and so we need these themes to kind of help direct us. Green chemistry is certainly an important theme that resides across category, yet all the different disciplines involved approach it through their own lens, interpreting it differently. So engineers look at it from a mode of testing. Marketing is asking, is it a profitable solution? Design is really addressing the end user's needs and desire. So early on, we use this common language and framework to help establish a common thread amongst the disciplines. Just real quick, I show this valuation tool, which is fairly detailed. It simply is let's say, a first-time pass at addressing the critical elements that make up a good solution. Technical feasibility, business viability, user desirability are all the key questions that we help decide of one product or one material versus another. So we use this measuring scale to kind of get a first-line value on something that comes in. Other methods are used as well, including prototyping, storyboarding, and internal surveys, external expertise to help critique our own point of view. So I'm wrapping up just a couple more slides. When Dave Wiedemann and I were going through this, he had this slide of saying, you know, in these different project stories, you know, what comes first? You know, the design or the material? It's kind of a common question. And, you know, do materials push the design capabilities, or does great design help invent the material need? I didn't have a firm answer, and so I went to our design studio director, Bruce Smith, and he answered it in this way. Materials are the key component to the design of things. As designers with focus on the needs of users, we manipulate form, mechanics, materials, processes to create a specific experience. Objects of the greatest value always leverage material choice with perfection. Nothing is left to chance, no compromise, not the easy way. The material question is the design question. It does not stand alone. A bowl can be made of glass, ceramic, paper, steel, but each one will essentially do the same thing. Why we choose one material over another, it's the design of experience question. we choose the material to create a specific experience to address the need. So with that, I think we have about 2 minutes for questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Steve, Saskia, and Charlie. If you have questions, please put them in your Q&A. So the first question is, have you found that there's been an increase in green chemistry products in recent years, and to what extent has the market been changing? And then if so, why do you think it's changed, or why hasn't it?
Well, this is Charlie. I would say there's definitely more and more awareness towards green chemistry solutions. So there's this growing demand at the consumer level. There's an expectation that from a kind of the front end of product development, it's really a challenge to even keep up with that demand. But I think what's very intriguing is in the past there's been an assumption that we would have to give up a price benefit to have a more green solution. And I think more and more that's just not the case every time. So it's a very active time for us, I believe, here at Steelcase.
Any others? Saskia or Steve? Okay. Another question is, do you think that marketing the green aspects of your products would have harmed sales at all?
No. Charlie? I can't think of it.
Yep. Yeah, I think, and what I was trying to make clear as I saw it, this is Steve, is that if only the green aspect was marketed, I think it probably would have hurt, because there was a strong presumption years ago that green meant paying more and getting less. We're getting over that, as Charlie just said, but I think leading only with the green argument is a recipe for a challenge.
Okay. Another question, how do you educate your company's message internally? You mentioned there are different lenses, and you need to create a common thread. How do you create that common thread?
Well, I would, so from Steelcase, I would say having the support from the top down, so within the hierarchy of the company itself, is very helpful, because it's truly not a grassroots type of effort. And big part of the history of the company, when, whether you're 10 years old or you're 100 years old, if it's part of your legacy, it is just simply part of who you are. But I think there's also an element of that's not about the hierarchy, but the network across disciplines that is so powerful. So my working, let's say, into our sustainability group and across into marketing, and where everybody's kind of working towards a common goal and establishing a common language, I think that is very beneficial.
And this is Saskia. There's a couple of ways that we do internal education. So we have a program that's called Green Scouts. And I think a lot of people come to Method because they want to work for a company that's trying to do the right thing. And so there's definitely like a thirst and an interest in learning more about greenskeeping. But we have this educational program that we integrate into our weekly huddle. So every Monday morning we have an all-office company meeting from 9 to 10 on Monday, and we just integrate maybe like a 5 to 10 minute update about what we're doing on greenskeeping, or maybe just do a spiel about a new ingredient that we're integrating, and just have that be a part of our educational program. We also have a cross-functional group that are functional leads from finance and from our operations team that all get together, and they have an interest in participating. And I think the value there is that within the company, we really rely on people that are working more directly with certain projects to be the experts, and they know how we could be doing better as a company. So they tend to have the best ideas about how we can make their function better.
Okay, thanks. Another question. So Saskia, you mentioned that you have the code of conduct and that you have the reduction incentives for suppliers and manufacturers. So how effective has that been? And do you communicate examples to all of your suppliers to educate your supply chain?
Yeah, so the code of conduct is great because it's a required component of the contract that everyone signs. And it includes things that are just like fair labor practices, fair wage practices, requires that they recycle on site, and then also the reporting that I mentioned on water waste and water materials and energy. And the incentive program has been really successful. We always get our suppliers coming back to us with interesting ideas. They always have things in the pipeline that they want to be working on, and we're able to provide just a small amount of seed funding and encouragement to make sure that they can implement it. And then we have created, through that, kind of a catalog of these projects that we try to get other suppliers to implement. So that creates a kind of library of ideas. We keep track of the metrics that are associated with either the energy reduction or the greenhouse footprint that has been achieved by implementing these different programs. And that helps us expand and roll out and share those programs.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Steve. Maybe I could just sort of add a comment there, because we sort of provide a mirror image example of what Saskia just talked about with Method. We sit at sort of opposite ends of long supply chain, and we supply into a long channel to market. And so for us, it's more of less a supplier focus, because we are sort of go from the field forward, and we flip it around and have a, if you will, a code of conduct equivalent that we use downstream. Now, it would be arrogant to assume that we could dictate what folks do all the way down to the consumer with our product, but we do say that, look, folks, if you want to use our trademark, there's restrictions of use. There's a restricted set of substances you cannot use, a prohibited list. There's fair labor practices. So it's sort of the same thing Saskia talked about, but working downstream to market.
Do you also find that the efficiency products that you incentivize, do they reduce your REC/offset purchase needs?
So instead of choosing to buy carbon offsets, we set aside the same financial value and offer those as incentives to our suppliers. And in essence, we do calculate the amount of energy efficiency and related carbon emissions that we get from those projects. Truthfully, they don't end up being the same amount of direct carbon reductions that would be that we would so-called get credit for by buying the carbon offsets. And that just is a nature of the programs themselves and the way that the carbon offset programs work. But we do find that, we're guaranteed that additionality from the incentives that we provide, and then we know that the incentives or that the reductions that we're getting are directly to our carbon footprint.
Okay. The last question. What is the most important lesson you've learned about how to more effectively communicate greenness while talking about performance benefits internally and externally to the firm?
This is Steve. I'll make a short answer for us. I think it's the learning for us has been we were rather, I guess, cagey early on to communicate where we were going, because we wanted to sort of have the solution in our hands before we got there, and it's a mistake. I think we've learned it. It's just best to be transparent about forward direction, even if it's a long road ahead of you. to lay out the roadmap and where you're at, and then communicate regularly about how you're doing things to improve your product and processes. So that's one learning for us.
I'll speak. It's a really good question. It's I'm continuing to ponder it because it's not kind of a black or white answer. It feels like you know, we're on this continuum. I think so. What we know and understand today, and what we ask for, is bound to grow, to emerge. Material chemistry is very, very important, and it's something that can really help govern decisions that we make. Yet equally important is these life cycle decisions of what happens at the end of a product's life, the ability to disassemble. Is there a waste stream for it? You know, what market it's going to serve are all influencers that I don't know, can weigh heavily on the decisions that we make. So it's a good question. I don't have a black and white answer for it.
Thank you, everybody, very much. I'd like to thank again Steve, Saskia, and Charlie. We really appreciated your time and your presentations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.